Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. On his email. Yeah.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. It's the Brian and David show.
That's right. Hey,
We
we're
are the
dedicated.
Reboot, and yeah, maybe a little light today. People traveling and vacation, personal stuff, so all good. Today we're going
Done
to
a
talk
lot of
about.
that this
Yep,
last couple of weeks. Yeah.
I think I need some of that too.
Yeah. That would be a good idea.
Yeah. Today we're going to talk about identifying critical assets and determining or assigning a risk profile score to these assets.
Right.
Before we start, I'm Brian Bradshaw with B&L PC Solutions on Long Island in New York, and I'm joined by. Oh,
And I am Dave Groot with WinStar Technologies in Culpeper, Virginia,
cool.
thriving, robust metropolis of
There
Culpeper.
you go. So, critical assets are specific entities that are of extraordinary importance.
Mhm.
That if it's incapacitation or destruction would have a very serious debilitating effect on the ability of the systems, service, or business to continue to function effectively. I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about here, and that can vary from it can be data, it can be the protection of that data, it can be hardware, it can be So they first must be identified,
Mhm.
these mission critical assets, and again, if compromised, they're going to cause major damage to the business, and so the point of identifying these assets is to determine the best way to distribute resources and design an appropriate structure that minimizes the risk associated with the potential breach, compromise of these assets, and that's through you can identify them through risk, identifying the risk and the impact, right?
Mhm. And the likelihood,
Exactly, exactly.
right? So yeah, that's also a big part of it. But yeah, you're right. Like when it's funny, we actually talked about this in one of our recent workshops where we were trying to identify what to protect, right? And
Hmm.
that's these assets that you're speaking of. And I always try and like equate it when I'm talking to folks to simplify it. It's like, look, just kind of start thinking in your head, like right now, like if I walked in Monday morning and X was not there, was not available,
Right.
how would that impact me, right? So, but then you got to start really digging into the operations and the flow of the day because the obvious things are going to jump out. Certainly your line of business app or your file server or your emails or, those things jump right to the front. But then there's all the little things that you don't necessarily think about when it comes to, hey, could I function tomorrow if my payroll system was down and I couldn't pay my employees? Or if I didn't know how much money I owed my vendors or my banks and I couldn't pay my lines of credit on time? Or I had a fleet of mobile phones that my staff has and they can no longer be used because we don't know the numbers or like just anything. I'm starting like, I'm just saying like, think about, start with the coffee pot. Like
Yeah.
literally, how's my day going to be impacted if that coffee pot doesn't work? That's
Yeah.
not a big deal. So I'm not going to worry about that, right? Because Starbucks is right down the road. I can grab another cup of coffee. I'm good. Okay. What about this front door? What if I can't get in it? Who do I call? What do I
Right.
do? Or the
Right.
building burned down, or the list goes on. Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
No. I'm in full agreement with you, and it can be what we generally do is when we're either whether it be working with an existing client, talking to potential new clients, we will look at the infrastructure and see what type of internet WAN connectivity they have available to them.
Right.
And if we see one connection, one incoming connection, and there's what you can get a redundant connection here. Well, I don't need that, and again, it kind of falls in line with this because well, you don't need it today, but
Correct.
there may be a day where you do. In fact, there's an outage, a truck or an operator or human error, cuts a fiber cable, then what? Then that's not a quick outage, right? And
No, that's a couple of days.
oh yeah, and so we push the redundancy on the internet connection where it's available, and that's extremely cost effective today compared to years ago. And alongside that, redundancy in that critical equipment, your firewalls, and they at least with I know with SonicWall, they license that redundancy, that high availability failover. You're not paying for double licenses, so you're getting an extra piece of equipment that, in the event this, primary A goes down for whatever reason, and it will at some point, you have that secondary firewall in place. Now that's a great layer that you're putting in there. That's going to, you've identified the risk. The risk is that 100, however many people can't work when the internet goes down because of a firewall. So you put together a matrix and you assign the risk, how important it is, right? The risk, and you give it a score. And without that, you're really not going to know. Like you can prioritize. Once you have it truly quantified, you can see, okay, here's, if these assets fail, here's the impact that it has, and look at the ones that the bigger the impact, the more it's going to cost you, and it could cost you with downtime, zero productivity, you name it. So the criticality analysis should be a company-wide effort and it considers all function of the operation.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't an IT thing, right?
No,
so not trying to keep coming back, but like that was something in the message I was trying to drive home in the workshop for these layers of defense that we had done. It's everybody in the organization, right? Like they're I don't care what your role is. I don't care who you are, what you're doing. Everybody's got something to do with IT. They're all touching the assets on some level, somewhere, some way. And there's a process and a policy attached to all those things somewhere, somehow. And you need to be aware of those. What about I can promise a lot of companies, they're not considering things like, what about their website, right?
Oh yeah.
What happens if it gets breached or hacked and somebody takes it over and dumps all the content, right? Or what about like their phone system, right? Like maybe they're, you're talking about redundancy. I mean, we have clients that have redundancy in their PBX, right? So if one goes down, we have a cloud PBX spun up, ready to go, sitting there just waiting, and it fails right over. So phone calls keep coming, because in that business, phone calls is everything.
Right.
So, that was a high likelihood. It was a high effect. And the risk was was impactful to the business, right? So they spent a couple of dollars to have the redundancy in a PBX, where most companies might not need that.
Yeah, I mean it's, and there's a ton of examples we can give and talk about here. But one of the things that I think is to protect these critical assets, right? You need to be able to detect, right? Detect.
Yes.
Is there an intruder or an action or a person that's failing, that's to do something, right? So you have to have that detection in place.
Or is
good.
Or is it something new that's supposed to be there, right?
Right.
That's the other monitoring and reporting, is like, oh, we have a new asset. Wait a minute. We shouldn't have a new asset, but guess what? There's something new on the network, and that's coming from scan, right? From monitoring,
right?
Vulnerability analysis, that kind of stuff.
So there's monitoring, which would detect, and then alerting, and then possibly verifying that alert is legitimate or not. So there's layers there.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly the whole thing is cybersecurity comes with layers, right? Like it's not one little thing. It's not one, it's not just zero trust. It's not just this. It's not, it's a lot of different things, because people, the hackers, the threat actors, take all sizes and shapes, right? They can be employees, they can be rogue, state, Korea kind of people. They can, it doesn't matter, but they're crafty, They're very intelligent. They got nothing but time, and the tool sets just mature over. The things that they can do to get into our systems today. Um, I mean, it's kind of scary. Like the some of the failabilities built into, for instance, Microsoft, right? Like the cloud and even in the Windows on-premise operating system, we still have vulnerabilities in those things that are not patched, that are extremely dangerous. And if they're not monitored and watched, like we don't have a patch to put
Right.
in.
Right.
It's not like we're not patching, it's just there isn't one.
Right. Right.
But like if I'm a threat actor and I can get into that network and I can get a password hash of an administrator, I can laterally move to another computer without the password, and I can convince the other computer that I know the password. That's
Right.
just built into Windows. And as far as the sign-in tokens for the Office 365 platform, those things are sitting on people's hard drives. Somebody gets the right information off your hard drive, they can carry that right over to their computer, and they're logged in as you.
Yep.
All day long.
Yep. And again, it's not so. The hardest part is going. Most small businesses aren't going to have a risk management team, right? That's going to go out and be able to kind of coordinate, facilitate this type of operation. But critical asset it can be it can be a patent, a copyright, information to your business.
That's right, intellectual property.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not just don't get hung up on that. It sounds like it's just IT and equipment, but that's a part of it, sure. But human resource information, proprietary software, research, schematics.
Look,
the list goes on.
You can be a one-man shop and only have email addresses of your clients, and that is still a critical asset, right? Like if you lose them, you don't have those. If they get hacked or breached, you've now allowed somebody to get the email addresses of your clients, who are going to now get phished and spammed, and and yes, you're probably not the first one for them to see. Everybody's guilty at this point, but bottom line is, don't give them something you don't need to, right? Don't make it easier than it has to be, because they do, while they're intelligent and while they're very crafty, they are lazy. And if they see, something stopping them from getting in, they'll move on. They'll go to something that's a little less secure, a little easier to get into, and they'll get a bigger payday. Unless they have a real specific need, to target that particular organization.
Yeah. And we've seen instances where critical asset can be that unsupported workstation server. Oh, I need it. I need it. I have to do it. And I'm doing work for the government. Okay.
No, I mean, you're reminding me of stories, like, one time coming in and finding an old server sitting underneath of a desk of an employee, plugged in so that they could get to old data when they needed it. And it had been like 3 years since they'd ever needed it, but yet that server was on the network sitting there. Nobody knew it was there. No maintenance, no patching, no anything. Unsupported operating systems, no security software. I'm just like, what are we doing in here? It's just like, holy cow. People don't, little things like it's amazing. I know we're kind of getting off guard here with the assets and the critical ones, but it makes a difference. Like what's a critical asset? My backups are critical assets, right?
Yeah.
So my data backup sets, if they're stored here locally or if they're stored in the cloud, I have to take controlled measures to make sure that remains secure. But what a lot of folks don't think of, or that they're doing, is they're managing. Like if I have a backup appliance and it's on the same network as a server, I shouldn't go log into that server and then go remote into the backup server and manage it from the server as an administrator, because you're now logging into a device, putting credentials into memory. Like, no need. Don't do that. Just a bad plan. People don't just lock the server. Log off, because you're leaving your credentials in memory.
Well, that's where it comes into securing the critical
Yeah,
assets.
that's right.
That's
And it's the monitoring and the management and the validation process,
Mhm.
right? It's, did they log off? Oh, they didn't. Well, we have a control that forces that to happen after 20 minutes. It doesn't lock your screen. It kicks your butt right out of the session, whatever it takes, and that's how you take care of that, right?
right. That's true. And different businesses, industries will define these
Sure.
different than others. It could
And
be. Go ahead. It's yeah.
the cyber insurance industry is defining cybersecurity as we know it today. They are making the rules because realistically, they're the ones who are paying. And so I guess he who holds the gold, gets to make the rules or something. But
Yeah.
they're definitely taking that on
Yeah. I
in the
mean,
landscape.
that's for sure.
Good stuff.
Yeah. So, again, so there's the key is to being able to identify the assets.
Yep.
That's kind of like your first step. Have a tabletop or whatever, and make it a group discussion, and identify, and then prioritize, and come up with something based on the severity and then the impact. So
Yeah.
and
And I want to emphasize, I don't think, you mentioned that get the people into different departments and stuff, but basically the owner of the liability, right, in the organization, right? So whatever we're talking about, whoever's purview that falls under is the owner of the liability for that, in my mind.
Mhm.
And so those are the people that we want to engage to develop the processes and the procedures and the way things are supposed to be, because we don't always in IT know what the impact to the organization is
Right.
with those particular systems. And we might not think it's so important if we lose a particular system. But if you
Because
hear
it
it from the
doesn't. Right.
manager's perspective, they might have a whole different thing of looking at. And so for it to be effective, you got to get them involved, but then it can then move straight into your incident response plan, right? Because while you're identifying what's critical and who it is that owns each one of those aspects in the organization, now we can start talking about what happens when we lose those things and how do we account for that, right? If you're
Yeah,
a
that
medical
like
processing,
agreed. That
can
could trigger into your
mhm,
incident response plan, and these said incidents should be, able to
handled
be
in this way,
identified in
right?
the incident response plan based on these SEV 1, 2, 3, whatever it is, and it should flow down into that. I agree with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a process. It's not always easy and quick and stuff, but it doesn't have to be hard. It's just, a long time ago, I'll tell a little story. I had a doctor who I was trying to convince needed to be doing server level backups, right? Not just the database, but the
Yeah.
whole system. And it was kind of funny because he was one. A lot of people, they don't buy in. No, that's got an expense to it. It's a couple hundred a month, what have you. I can't remember what the prices were, but he
Yeah.
didn't buy it. So we put it in. And about a month and a half later, he came rolling in one morning, and I'm on the floor, and I'm messing around with the server, behind the desk, and he's like, "What you doing?" I was like, "Putting your server back in." He's like, "Well, what do you mean putting my server back in?" Well, it crashed 3 days ago. Well, what do you mean it crashed 3 days ago? Yeah, I said, yeah, it crashed and we had to take it out and get it fixed. Well, we've been working. I said, you sure have. And I was like, that's because we got this thing in the backup, and like, then it clicked. He was just like,
Right.
and from that point forward, he was like, how's the backup? Is that working? So,
Yeah.
that's just what it is. I mean, we used to have a joke in our industry. What is a backup? Something you do after you crash, right?
Right.
Of
Yeah.
course,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a little more
And it does
important
kind of
these days.
segue a little bit into business continuity and the importance of
Mhm.
business continuity, because today we don't have a client that doesn't have a business continuity plan.
Look, a lot of compliance requires that.
Yeah.
From a best practice, it's a good idea. But if you're in a regulation, if you're in
Oh, sure.
finance or what, they require that you have continuity in your business
And
because
it's
they want to
not,
make sure that your service can still be delivered to the people who need it.
and what they're also cracking down on is proof that
Mhm.
it's being tested.
Yeah.
How often are you
Yeah. You
testing
can't
it? And
just
where's the
say
proof?
you're, that's right.
And you have
Yeah.
employee sign off on the testing. So it's here's everything. We've done it. It's been signed off on, and it works. Because
Look,
that's
we are
listen,
getting to a point for our clients where we are doing not just screenshots. We're doing full restores, testing files, and then validating that with certification on a weekly basis because
yeah, yeah,
that has to be, we do the screenshot every day, right? Well, that tells you the server booted. That doesn't necessarily tell you the data drive is intact, right?
right,
If there's a separate hard drive for the data, the server could still boot without it.
right,
So,
right.
again, just no guarantees, but yeah, with the mandates and the compliance, you're needing to certify that that's been done, not just say it's been done.
Yeah, we go shut down, unplug, and then say
Here it is.
follow your steps,
Yeah.
and you
Kick up a VPN tunnel and off you
and
go.
there's times where you know what, I couldn't do this or I can't do that, and we have live support during the testing
Yeah.
to help kind of do some quick mitigation, but it's not. There's things that legitimately, oh, I can't do this. Okay, that's something we need to know about. Let's address it, and then we on the subsequent test. Let's make
Right.
sure that that's been properly mitigated, and you can do that now and address any other issues because the technology, the infrastructure, there are changes there. Again, these are all risks at that point, and
Yep.
maybe you're moving to who knows, maybe your CRM system is cloud based and they're locking it down by your corporate IP address. And maybe we didn't know that. And when you're offsite and you're trying to test, I can't log
Sure.
into it. It doesn't work. Well, no, it works, but we know why it doesn't work. Let's come up with a solution for that. Those are things
Right.
that you're not going to know until you do it. And I'd rather be 95% proactive and 5% reactive than the other way around. And
That's right.
that's how you're going to be if you don't have a plan in place.
Look, I'm telling you, if you got it all written down and you got it documented and hey, when we spin this up in the cloud under a disaster, we know we got to get these IPs updated for conditional access. We know this checklist of things needs to take place to make it whole again. But you know what? That's a whole lot easier than trying to rebuild and figure it out from scratch without knowing any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's that recovery time objective, right? Not
Yeah.
where we want to recover to, but how quick can we get back up and running? And sure, it's going to take a little bit of extra time to get it configured right, but it's better than not having access to any of it, right? So
Couldn't agree more.
totally important stuff.
I'm with you.
It's just gotten really, scary out there. I'm people are just all over the place with this stuff and they're confused. They're hearing things from every side and they don't know what the right answers are.
Well, it's
And
overload. It's overload.
it,
It's an overload of information, and whether it be regulation mandates, coming down from insurance. It's there's a lot. I mean,
yep.
as you know, we talk about this probably every week that we get these insurance forms from clients on their questionnaire, and thank God for that virtual whiteout because it's no. You don't. This is all yeses. This is not true. That's what you should have. But let's have a conversation.
Right. Saying it doesn't make it so.
Right. So,
Right.
but yeah, it can be overload, information overload for some people. But that's where you kind of going back to our conversation last week. You defer to your experts,
Provider.
and
That's
you
right.
follow that advice and guidance. And again, find it's not an individual effort. It
Right.
can be, but it doesn't have to be, and it probably shouldn't be, depending on the size of your company. It should be something that's taken on with a small team, committee, whatever you want to establish to do it. But you'll get better results that way with that multifaceted input from staff. I mean,
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's funny. We were working on some stuff, and Stephanie came to me the other day and said, we're trying to come up with some correlations for, and we're basically like, okay, here's what you can do when you're by yourself, and then like here's what you can do with the team, right? And so like we're kind of play baseball by yourself, right? So you throw the ball, nothing happens. It doesn't come back. It doesn't, just do you throw it. But if you get a second person, they might catch it and throw it back to you. If you get a third person, they might teach you to do it a little better. And before you know it, now you got a team, right? And
Yeah.
you're able to play ball.
Yeah.
So whatever. My little story. I'll close with that.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, David.
Yes, sir.
We will.
It's been a great day.
Yep.
Good to
You
see
have a
you.
good day, and we'll see you guys next week.
All right. You stay safe.